Hey, I'm Ossie from Three Monkey Solderless, and welcome back to day 2 of the neck build of the Bread Whitford guitar that we're building from the Cootercaster. Yesterday we were working a lot on the neck, and we got, obviously the maple shaft sorted out. We've got the fingerboard sorted out. We've got the two ready to be mated together. And since this is a no truss rod neck, we don't have to put in a truss rod. So the next step is going to be doing what's called shaping the grip of the neck onto the back of the neck, right, of the shaft itself. And that's the contour, the radius, and there's a lot of ways that people will do this. There's probably as many ways as there are people. You can use anything from files, rasps, surf warm, sandpaper, belt sanders, draw knives, routers, anything that you can think of to remove wood, a pocket knife. If you felt like being here forever, anything that you feel like you could probably get away with using. What I've recently sort of gotten together for doing like strat necks and things like that is a combination of all of the above. Seems to work well for me. Removing a lot of material, let's say with a router bit, and then getting in there with the hand tools, with the sandpaper, with files and things like that to really fine tune the shape and get it to exactly where I want to go. But for removing a lot of wood quickly, you can't beat a router. And in this case, we're using the pin router. And then this guy here, which is a rather large roundover bit. So that's going to do the majority of the hogging of the wood as we apply the router bit to the neck shaft. Now to guide it all, to make everything run really smoothly and to avoid a lot of complications and disasters, I built this, which is sort of a guide for the pin router, right? For this pin router here. And it's a snakehead shape, but actually this shaft is the same shaft as on the Strat neck, so it matches up perfectly well. And what you do basically is you mount this neck stock onto this piece, clamp it down. I've got some screws that will go through here as well. A little double stick tape for extra assurance that it won't move. And you mount this on here, and then on the back of this jig, we have the same thing, right? So it has these little, if you can see here, they're little sort of like curves at the points where we want the router bit to move away from the neck, and also at this point too. And that'll determine sort of where the carve starts and where the carve finishes. All right, and this is on the bottom side. And what this does is it rides, if you know anything about pin routers, I've got a little a little bearing, half-inch guide right here, which matches sort of, the bearing on this guy. So that bearing on the router bit isn't really what's controlling our router bit so much as it is that locating pin at the bottom, which is riding along this particular, let's say, template here. So what you do basically is put this jig into, or on the table, on the bed of the pin router, and as you move it along, the bearing rides along that sort of, mirror image of this underneath and controls where the router bit gets into the wood. And then it's just a matter of gradually lowering the carriage here down and creating more and more carve. Now the great thing about this is it allows you to see the wood as you're removing it to kind of tell if there's any issues going on. Unlike if you were doing it on a router table where you're kind of like cutting from underneath and you can't really see what's going on and where am I going to stop, where am I going to finish. That can get a little bit dicey. With this, you see what's going on. All of your start and finish points are already pre-decided for you. It's just basically a matter of keep your fingers out of the bit's way and try not to inhale too much sawdust. And then get it down to a point where you're happy, and then you can clean up the rest with, files, rasps, and all the rest of those good things. All right, so I think we should just go ahead and mount this thing up, mount the neck onto the jig here, put the bit into the router, and we should just get hogging. So let me get that set up, and we'll be right back. Okay, a little close-up of the jig, just how it's mounted. As you can see up here, we've got a little piece of plexi with the 2 screw holes going through the peg holes. That's securing it down, and on this side we have our little, clamp there. and then some double stick tape underneath it. All right, so I just wanted to give you a little close-up view of that. I'm going to put the table up, or rather put the pin router up, and then we'll get started. I've got the pin router all set up, ready to go. Just press on the floor control, let it come down. Start it up, keep your fingers away, and see what happens. All right, let's see where this goes. All right, so that's the basic sort of like operation. One side, then the other side, lowered a little bit more. One side, the other side, lowered a little bit more. And you just keep going until you're happy with where you're at. So I'm going to go ahead and start going to town on this thing. And then we'll check back with you in a couple. Okay, so I think we've done the majority of the hogging of the wood off the neck. We could go ahead and pull the sled out here and give you a close-up look of what we've accomplished. As you can see, we've put a lot of the grip on there already. We have this center portion, obviously, that's raised up that we need to remove. That'll be done with, you know, the rasps and the sandpaper when we're fine-tuning the transitions here and up by the neck. But really, to get this far with rasps and with sandpaper would be several hours worth of work, which we've just completed in probably about 5 minutes. And we've also achieved a consistent roundover from which to start with, where it's where it's symmetrical. We're probably going to put an asymmetric carve on this because I think it's more comfortable for the hand. But it's good to start from a point where there is symmetry, and then you can move away instead of trying to take an even amount off of each side. This really does a good job, and there's guys out there. I didn't come up with this jig. I think I've seen it in multiple places, but I think it's a fairly standard sort of like neck building thing that people got, and you can probably look on another video about how to make one, but it's pretty self-explanatory if you know how the pin router works. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and remove the neck from the sled here, and then we're going to go on to the next part of the operation, and we'll be right back. I've gone ahead and removed the neck shaft from the jig from the sled. As you can see, the fingerboard is not on there, obviously, and we have ourselves, let's say, 70% of the work, 75% of the work done in shaping the neck in terms of, the heavy lifting. So we're going to move on to the next step, which is going to be actually put on the fingerboard. So when you're building a neck, there's something that you got to keep in mind, and that's one word, and it's called flat. And if your stuff ain't flat, you might as well just, throw everything out, because you're never going to have a guitar that's worth anything, that you could even play. So flat is the key. Flat, 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 flat. And wood tends to move when you cut it. So, having said this, I've had a lot of maple necks go boing on me when I cut them out, and they twist, they bow, they do all kinds of crazy stuff. Some of that is a result of, the wood itself not being in my shop long enough and acclimating to the environment before I go ahead and work it. Some of it is that some wood just doesn't want to be a guitar. It just doesn't want to do that. It would rather be a bow or something like that. So anyway, this piece of wood seems to have managed to get this far without really going boing at all. So I'm pretty happy with that, but that doesn't mean it's perfect. So we need the playing surface before we glue this fretboard on to be dead flat. And then when we glue it on, we're going to flatten it again. And we're going to keep flattening it. And we're going to flatten it until it's flat. And that's the way it's going to be. So anyway, we'll start off with our square. Get yourself a good square, a straight edge, something that doesn't move around too much, and something that's really accurate. So I got this Pinnacle one. They're kind of expensive, but you know what? This thing, I use it for so many different things. I use it for joining. It's great. So I'd recommend something like this. So anyway, we're going to put it on here, and we're going to look for light and see what we've got. See if there's any indication that this particular piece is moved a lot. And you know what? This thing it does seem dead flat. It does. But we need to be dead sure that it's dead flat. So what we've got is a piece of granite, all right, with this 120 grit sandpaper, sticky sandpaper that you get from Stu Mac on a roll. It's sticky on one side, so it sticks to things. And it's stuck onto this piece of granite. Now the granite is just, you could go to any like countertop place and just ask the guy at the counter, be like, listen, have you got a piece that's like 4 inches wide and like, you know, a couple of feet long that you got in the dumpster? Can I go back there and grab a piece of granite that you're not using? And they're going to give you granite. So just go and get yourself a piece of granite, and then you can lay out your paper on there. And then you've got yourself a great, you know, surface that's dead flat, that's not going to move, that you can use to flatten things on. So what I'm going to do is I've got some double stick tape. Again, my favorite stuff, right? Double stick tape on the back of this neck on that little portion that still has to be removed, right? And I'm going to peel this tape here, and then I've got this piece of leftover Carina from another build that kind of is in the shape of a little turtle or something that I'm going to use and stick on here. That's going to help me evenly distribute the weight while I'm sanding this playing surface flat. I've got a mechanical pencil here, another one of my best friends, which I'm going to use to kind of mark up the surface right here, to let me know if I'm missing any points, right? So I'm going to use the pencil and give myself some guidelines here. Okay, so now I'm basically going to sand this flat, and I know it's going to be flat when all my guidelines are gone. All right, so basically the idea here is you got to have a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of skill, that you're not going to be constantly applying pressure all over the place. You want consistent pressure to maintain a flat surface. If you start leaning on this side, then leaning on this side, you're going to make yourself a nice bow out of something that was flat. So the key is I usually go in one direction, lift, bring down, and keep going. So something along the lines of, I hope you can see this. I'm going to have it set up a little bit differently when I'm actually doing it, but I'll take it, I'll place it down, I'll get my pressure points, and then I'll move. And then I'll pick it up again and bring it back to the same place. Get my body set weight evenly and then move it through again. And that's really how you make things flat, is you have to pay attention to your body, where your weight is, and that you're consistently doing the same pressure in the same spots over and over and over again repetitively. And that's what will really flatten something. And as you can see, I've already removed some of these pencil marks. So we're going pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and flatten this thing out. Shouldn't take too much considering how flat it is already, but I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll get back to putting on the fingerboard. Took about, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes, and we've got a very flat playing surface here. And it's actually really sharp on the sides. You could probably cut yourself too from that. So we did a good job here. What we did end up noticing was it didn't so much curve upward as it kind of cupped a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. That's what the wood seemed to have been sitting in the shop. It cupped a little bit. I noticed that we had to remove a little bit of wood on the outside of the piece, like along here and along here, because the center was a little bit lower. So the board sort of cupped a bit. So that's fine. It was probably something like, I don't know, a thousandth. So not a lot of wood removal. All right, so we've basically got ourselves what we want. A nice flat surface on which to glue our nice flat fingerboard, which after we glue it on probably will not be nice and flat anymore. Anytime you introduce water to wood, things can go awry. But you know, when you put on the fingerboard, you're going to want to go ahead after it's all dried up in any case, and before you fret it, you're going to want to, you know, work it a little bit too with a radius block and make sure everything's nice and smooth and that it is the correct radius, blah, blah, blah. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're actually going to get this fretboard glued on. And I think I got to set up a few things for you before we could do that, so I'll be right back. Okay, so we're ready to glue the fingerboard onto the neck shaft itself. If there's ever a time that I like to panic, it's now. Working against glue is something that I'm not very fond of, although we're using some Titebond today, but using hide glue, then I'd just be freaking out. This wouldn't even go on film. But anyway, the prep work is done. We've got it flat. I've used some tape, some masking tape to go around the edges of the neck to protect it from glue squeeze out. I mean, you can probably wipe it off if you wanted to, but I'm trying to not make a big mess, and this seems a lot easier. Any glue that comes off, we just peel it off, comes off with the tape. So we're ready to go there. We have our little alignment holes ready. We have our fingerboard. We've got our two 16th inch bits that are protruding through the surface there that'll mate up to register with our neck. We just kind of put it into place here, bang, bang, and it's perfectly in place. It ain't gonna move. That's a good thing. So we've got those. We've got some cork. You'll see what we need that for in a minute. We have a J roller, which is great for spreading the glue and making sure that you've got, you know, a nice even layer. You don't want it like lumpy sort of glue. We've got our clamp to clamp the thing down. We've got our Titebond, nice and warm. We've got a wet paper towel. We've got a dry paper towel. And we've got some of this, well, it's basically plastic string. I don't know. I make it out of, you know the stuff, the pallet wrap that you can get on a roll? It's like saran wrap, but it's extra strong. I basically roll up this stuff, and it has some flex to it. And I use that to wind the fretboard down onto the neck shaft itself, and that's the clamp, right? And I find that works better than anything else because it's even pressure. It's all the way around, and it's everywhere. So that seems to be working well for me than having to use cauls and get it too hard here and too soft there, and you know, really having to work the neck again once you've got it clamped down. All right, so let's get this thing set up. What we're going to do is we're going to put our cork here, put our neck down. We're going to put the other piece of cork on top to protect it. We've got a big C-clamp here. We're going to go ahead and just clamp this whole thing down here onto the table here so we can work on it, and we have plenty of room here to do what we need to do. All right, so now we've got our fingerboard. I'm going to make sure that that's preset, right? Okay, take out our little screws, or not screws, but rather our little pins there, which are actually drill bits. Make sure that there's no crap on the board that might get under there. Everything looks good. Everything looks good here. We're going to be applying glue to both surfaces. So the procedure is going to be glue, roll out, place the pins in, line it up, put it down, grab our twine, and start going to town winding this thing down. And then we'll let it sit overnight. All right, so here goes nothing. Grab some of this glue. Start laying it out. You don't need a whole lot of glue, right? A thin layer is best. So then what I do is I just wet my fingers a little bit just to aid. And the best glue spreading device is, in fact, your fingers. To start with, I always start with my fingers. And I've got the tape there to protect, obviously, the rest of the fingerboard, or rather the rest of the neck from getting glue all over it. Okay, so we've got that. Now we can do that. Now we'll go ahead and wipe off our fingers again a little bit. Then we'll grab our fingerboard here, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put a sine wave of glue on there, right? And we're going to kind of smear it out like cream cheese at your favorite H&H bagel shop. Smearing this out here. Need a little bit more water in my hands. It's getting a little sticky, right? Imagine that, sticky glue. Okay, now you really have, you know, I don't know, a half an hour to work with, you know, this type of, what is it, alphatic resins? You don't have, you know, to panic here, but I do anyway. Let's say when I'm building Les Pauls or Gibsons or trying to make a really accurate kind of, you know, reproduction of something that requires high glue, that can get a little scary because you literally have seconds to work. So right now I'd already be screwed. I would have waited too long. The glue would be all starting to gel up on me. So that would be bad. So the next thing I do now is use my J roller here, and I just go basically roll out the glue so that I get myself a nice even layer, and that the excess glue is kind of run off. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to give myself a little bit of a roll here, get it all going, right? That looks pretty good. Clean off my roller here. Just get it started, really. We can go ahead and, you know, soak it afterwards and get all the rest of the glue off of there. Get some of this glue off my hands. So when we're handling the fingerboard, we don't get glue all over the front of it as well. Then we're going to go ahead and insert the pins through their pre-drilled holes, right? Make sure that looks good. Take the other pin, put it through. Okay. Now comes basically lining it all up. That one's registered, that one's registered. Get a little glue on my fingers there. Press down, make sure that it is down. Okay, nothing is moving. So we have these pins in the right place. They're located nicely. So now we can just go ahead and start wrapping the neck in our cellophane string-like stuff. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just kind of wind it over itself a little bit here. And usually I'll start in the middle and then kind of work my way all the way around the thing. But I'm just going to allow the first couple of lines to tie down the string itself to itself. So now I can just go ahead and start, you know, stretching it around this neck, creating the tension that's really going to seat the whole thing down and keep it registered and tightly clamped. Now we're going to come back around again. And as you can see, if you were to use a caul or something like that, you would have those pins in the way, right? I think I hear the UPS man out back, perhaps delivering something that we're going to be unboxing in the next video, which is for this particular guitar. Something cool I think everybody can appreciate. So yeah, we're going to continue wrapping this neck, getting it tight. This is kind of what I guess, you know, reminds me of, I went to go visit Gibson a couple of years. And this is sort of what they do for binding, except they use cotton, right? Like almost an endless line of cotton fabric, like about what a t-shirt would be like if you had just ripped it into a million pieces, you know. But one continuous thing. It's pretty amazing. And the guys in the shop there are so quick with the binding to get everything set in place and get everything done before that glue, that plastic glue heats, or rather, excuse me, cures, and the whole thing is, you know, too late to do anything. So we're going to keep wrapping, going back over the same territory over and over again, trying to get this thing on there really tight. Make sure it doesn't move at all. We're almost to the end here of the twine like stuff. And there we go. Now I'll just take a piece of tape and just tape it down into place. Maybe another on the side so it doesn't move. But yeah, that's it. We can take the clamp off now. Being careful not to drop the neck on the floor. And we can examine the sides. As you can see, we've got some squeeze out. Not a whole lot of it, as you know, we used a thin bead of glue. But yeah, everything looks really good. So I'm very happy with the way this has worked out. So we're just going to set it aside to dry overnight. And then tomorrow we can continue on building this neck and then go on to the body. So thanks for watching. I hope you found some of this stuff amusing, and we'll see you next time.